Om Mani Padme Om. Om Mani Padme Om. Om Mani Padme Om. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the service. Reverend Shanti is away, so I'll be filling in. The service will be first loving kindness meditation that Subodha will lead. Then there will be a Dhamma talk by Reverend Kusala with a question and answer afterwards. And we'll end with chanting. Thank you. Subodha.
Let's begin by finding a comfortable position for ourselves. We may rest our hands in our laps and close our eyes. And then we can take a couple of nice deep breaths just to help the body settle into place. And now let us generate thoughts of metta, thoughts of goodwill, loving kindness for ourselves. And these are more than just words, more than just thoughts. It's a true, wholesome wish, a desire that we be happy, that we be peaceful, that we be free from suffering, that we unburden our hearts from greed, aversion, delusion, greed, anger, delusion, that we might have hearts and minds that are luminous, free. And we can extend this as well to our loved ones, our parents, our siblings, our extended family, as well as our friends. That they too be happy, that they too be peaceful, that they too have hearts unburdened. We can also wish this for our admirable friends in this life that we try to live as Buddhists, our guides and companions, our brothers and sisters in the holy life, that they as well be happy and peaceful, unburdened, luminous. And further, we can extend this to our acquaintances, people we know well or not so well, people we see frequently or infrequently. even the people in our lives that might be difficult or challenging. For all of them as well, we wish that they be happy and peaceful, free from suffering, free from stress, free from pain. That their hearts and minds might also be unburdened, that their hearts and minds might also be luminous. For if each and every one of us could have a heart so unburdened, so free, who could any of us rightfully call an enemy? And so with that thought, let us extend our metta, our goodwill, for all beings everywhere, in all directions, above us, below us, to the front and behind, to the left and the right, in all directions everywhere. May all beings be happy. May they be peaceful. May they be free from suffering. May they be free from stress and pain. May their hearts, may their minds be free, unburdened, luminous. May all of us find such peace and happiness in our hearts. And with that, let us bring our attention to the breath, unifying mind and body right here, right now, with the in-breath and the out-breath. Let us be attentive in this way for a few moments until we hear the bell.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Subodha. Reverend Kusala, are you online?
Okay, and okay.
Reverend Kusala will give us our Dharma talk today.
Okay. It's good to be here. It's SoCal cold today. We've got 53 degrees and looking towards some sunshine on the weekend. So today I'm going to talk about the first path factor. And the reason I'm going to talk about that is because I've been invited to go to a Vietnamese temple in Garden Grove for the next few months. And what they asked me to do was talk about Buddhism to their young people, to their children. The thing is that their children are in school and they are becoming Americans. They are being enculturated, and so they wanted an American monk to speak about Buddhism so the young people will realize that Buddhism is alive and well in America. So after being born in Iowa and ordained in Los Angeles, I suppose I qualify. And I thought to myself, well, what am I going to talk about, for the next few months? How am I going to get them involved in Buddhism and try and make it interesting? And so what I came up with was something really simple, the Four Noble Truths, which seems to be a great place to start. And that allows everybody then to get on board with Buddhism and the importance of practice. Okay, so there is a booklet by a Buddhist monk named Bhikkhu Bodhi. And Bhikkhu Bodhi's booklet is 126 pages or something like that, published by the Buddhist Publication Society in Sri Lanka. And if you follow me on Facebook, you can find a link to download the PDF. So it's a free PDF to be downloaded. So I went and remembered what the Four Noble Truths are. And the first truth is that life is ultimately unsatisfactory. It's never the way it's supposed to be. It's never the way you want it to be. It's never the way it could be. And yet we still go every day hoping for something better or hoping for something different. And it never seems to materialize. So that would be the first truth that the historical Buddha found on his enlightenment day. The second truth was why we suffer. So if life's unsatisfactory, there must be a reason. And the reason is we have craving, attachment, desire, something that can't be ever satisfied. We also have aversion. Now, I find as I get older, I have less attachment and more aversion, but I suppose that's part of the aging process. Do you want to go out and have some fun? No, I don't know what fun is anymore. Do you want to be around 1,000 people? No, I don't think so. Do you want to just sit in your room alone? Yeah, that sounds good. So as we get older, our desires change, our attachments change, and our aversions change as well. Then he continued and he said, I have found the answer to suffering. I figured it out. I rediscovered it. Now, the reason I say rediscovered is because according to some forms of Buddhism, there were 27 Buddhas before this one, Siddhartha Gautama, Shakyamuni Buddha. There were 27 before. And when the last Buddha died, and the last person that remembered that teachings of that Buddha died, the Dharma had been lost to the world. And we had to wait for the birth of Siddhartha, who had been a bodhisattva many lifetimes before, and then finally born, and then finally went out to seek the answer to suffering, and then finally found the answer. And he started the wheel of Dharma turning again. So what is the path to the end of suffering, nirvana? The path is the noble eightfold path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Those 8 path factors will allow us to realize nirvana. And I say realize nirvana is because the potential is already there. Each one of us has the seed of nirvana already implanted in our consciousness. But what we need to do is water it and fertilize it and groom it and let it take root and let it grow. So we don't need to go to India or Thailand or Nepal. We can simply be where we are and practice Buddhism, and we will have that realization eventually. It may take a few lifetimes, but during those lifetimes, you get really good at practice, and it might become easier and easier as time goes on. So I'm going to talk about the first path factor called right view. And the irony of the first path factor is that that's where we start, and that's what we end up with. So we start by trying to understand what the first path factor is. And then as we go through all the other 7 truths, the 7 path factors, when we achieve our nirvana, our enlightenment, our liberation, we now have in permanent place right view. We now see the world exactly the way it is. So in Bhikkhu Bodhi's booklet on the Eightfold Path, he says right view consists of 2 things. He says it consists of, number 1, karma, the right view of karma, and then the right view of the noble Eightfold Path. So let's start with karma. Let's see what right view of karma really means. Karma is taking the place of a divine lawgiver for Buddhists. We do not have someone who decides for us what is right and what is wrong and what is the penalty. We lack that in Buddhism. Rather, we have karma, cause and consequence. So we start to investigate what produces karma. In a human being, we have 3 ways of producing karma. Number 1, thinking. Thinking is the first way we produce karma. Now, the consequence of thinking is the least of the consequences in the other 2 ways. So you can think good thoughts, or you can think bad thoughts, or you can be unskillful, or you can be skillful, but the consequences of all those thoughts are fairly minute. They don't add up to much at all. But now we come to speech karma. The consequences of speech karma are greatly increased. So we need to be careful about what we say. No harsh speech, malicious speech, gossip or idle chatter, or false speech. Those kinds of speech create unskillful, negative karma, and the consequences will come back and bite us. And the third way a human creates karma is through physical action. And that has the greatest consequence of all. Now, if you think about karma like gravity, you realize that if you're walking around and all of a sudden trip and fall, gravity could care less. You could curse gravity. You could say, "Why did you do this to me?" And gravity has no response. Karma is the same way. Karma is a natural law of cause and consequence for human beings. And if you're unskillful and petition karma to give you a break, to forgive you for what you've thought, said, or done, karma has no ears to hear that. And now you might say, well, I'm going to get on my knees and I'm going to pray to karma to forgive me because I have consequences to manifest in my life. Karma has no eyes. Karma can't see you on your knees praying. So we have a certain amount of responsibility with karma, that we are in charge of having a better life or a more difficult life. Now you might say, well, how long does it take for the consequences to manifest? So if I say something really unskillful, will there be an immediate response, an immediate consequence, or will it happen in a week or months or a year or a lifetime? Well, see, we don't know. Karma isn't that specific, that we, generally speaking, do not have instant consequence for our thinking, speaking, or acting. There seems to be a time delay when it comes to karma and consequence. And that gives us a chance to rectify the problem. Okay, so here we are, and we've said something really bad or unskillful to somebody, and you know it's going to come back and haunt you. And then you say to yourself, well, maybe I can use karma in a positive way. Maybe I can say some pleasant things to the person I said that I said before were in an unpleasant way. And maybe that will soften the consequence of what I said so unskillfully. Or maybe I can befriend that person, and we can go out and have a couple beers together and talk about stuff. And maybe that will then get rid of all the consequences of my unskillful speech. So we have ways of dealing with the consequence, but it takes us and puts us in a proactive position that now we need to go out and do something to change the consequence of that unskillful karma. Okay, so you might say to yourself, well, why are humans so unskillful? What's their problem? Why don't they get it together? And the deal is, we are saddled with greed, hatred, and delusion. Those drive us through our life. Those drive us every day. And oftentimes the greed and the hatred and delusion create this unskillful karma that we're producing. So we really need to work on that. And one of the ways we can work on that is to use the opposite to neutralize the greed, hatred, and delusion. So for instance, what is the opposite of greed? Generosity. What is the opposite of hatred and anger? Loving kindness and compassion. What is the opposite of ignorance? Wisdom and clarity. And we can practice increasing our generosity, increasing our kindness, and increasing our wisdom. Wisdom by studying the Dharma. Hatred and anger by being kinder. Greed by practicing generosity. Now, in a book by Ram Dass said, give yourself an allowance. Give yourself a generosity allowance. So put in other terms, we could say, okay, I'm going to give myself $5 a week to be generous with. And I'm going to carry those $5 with me. And if somebody says, hey man, do you got any extra money? And I could say, hey, here's $1. Okay, or maybe $2. And then as I go through the week, I give the $5 away. And then I don't give anything else away because that's my allowance for generosity. Okay, so the next week comes, another $5. And off I go into the world to practice generosity. Now, one of the ways I started to practice generosity was leaving coins behind in a vending machine. So it might cost $1.25. I'd put $2 in, 75 cents would go into the little coin holder, and I just leave it there. And I don't know if you're like me, but if you go to a vending machine and find a quarter in the coin slot, you know it's your day. It almost inspires you to go out and get a lottery ticket because you found a quarter. Now, how often can you change somebody's life with a quarter? I ask you. Never, unless you leave it behind in the coin slot. So that's how I started practicing generosity, because I didn't have a lot of money and still don't, but a quarter here or $1 there, oftentimes it's doable. Now, say you don't want to give money because you're concerned about how they're going to spend the money and you want to attach a lot of specifics to that. I'll give you this $1, but you can't do this with it and you can't do that with it. Well, that sort of defeats the purpose of generosity. So sometimes you can spend your time rather than your money. So say somebody comes up to you and says, you know what happened to me yesterday? And normally you might say, I could care less. But now you're practicing generosity. So you sit down and spend some time listening to what happened to him or her yesterday. What a great way to spend a few minutes, because it's going to make that person feel so much better and realize that somebody actually cares or seems to care. And as we go through this practice of generosity of time, you'll find that the caring does increase, and you become fascinated by all the stories that people have. Everybody has a story, some have 10. And you sit there and listen, and you go, yeah, okay. And then you might want to share a story with somebody that you don't know. And maybe they're practicing generosity of time as well. And they'll sit down and listen to you. Yesterday, when I went to Leisure World in Seal Beach, California, I gave my talk. And after my talk, a woman of Asian descent comes up to me, and she's going to share something with me, because I spoke about taking probiotics. I spoke about taking CoQ10. I spoke about taking my multivitamins every day and how much better I felt and how much more energy I have. And she said, you know, I found something that really works well on digestion, and I take it every day. And so I'm listening to her, and I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be good. She's going to have some Asian ancient wisdom she's going to share with me. And I can go out now and buy those plants or whatever she's going to suggest and feel even better. And so I had to ask, I said, well, now, what did you find? What do you use? What is your secret? She said, I eat sauerkraut. I go, I would have never guessed. Thank you for sharing that with me. So everybody has something they want to say, and we can take the time to listen and appreciate the diversity and of life and being a human being. So now, another aspect of karma that's really important is that it's the only thing we get to take with us to the next lifetime. Karma travels with us lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. So our job, in a way, is to create as much merit and good karma in this lifetime to assure us a better life next time. And so it's sort of like having a karma account. And you can withdraw your karma, or you could deposit your karma. And at the end of your life, you'll have this merit account, this karma account, and you'll be able to feel comfortable in letting go of this lifetime, because the next lifetime is going to be even better. Maybe with a lot of good karma, you'll be born in Malibu. How lucky will that be? And you can go surfing every day. But it requires us to really think about our job in this lifetime is to produce good quality karma. Now, when I talk about rebirth, I'm not talking about reincarnation. A lot of people get this confused. So reincarnation requires that person to have a soul that then migrates to the next vessel and the next vessel and the next vessel until ultimately all the lessons have been learned, and that soul merges with the great soul, the mothership. Okay, the Buddha didn't really get into that, because he said, you know, the problem with having a soul is that it's fixed and unchanging and independent. And in all the time I've been practicing the Dharma and experimenting in my meditation, I have never found anything that stands apart or alone that doesn't change. What I have come to understand is that being a human being is very much a process, not an event. Now, I know you probably have people in your life that feel that their life is an event, and that's okay. Let them have their event. But you know what? This process is our ticket to freedom, because we're always changing and becoming different, and with the possibility of becoming better. So if you never changed, you wouldn't get any worse, but you wouldn't get any better either. So this process we go through as a human being has no beginning. The Buddha said there was no first cause, which to me is really interesting, because everybody wants to know how it started. And they've got the Big Bang theory, and you have the God theory, and you have this theory, and you have that theory. And of course, we'll never know for sure. But the Buddha said, no, there really isn't any beginning. And there really isn't any end. But I found the end of suffering. And the end of suffering is nirvana. And when you achieve nirvana, you end your suffering, you end your karma, and you end all future rebirths. Because what migrates lifetime to lifetime? It's your karma. And if you end your karma, you can no longer migrate from lifetime to lifetime. And what's the problem with that? The problem with migrating lifetime to lifetime is birth. Because birth leads to sickness, birth leads to old age, and birth leads to death. Every time. How many infinite times have we done this already? Been born, gotten old, gotten sick, gotten disgusted, and then we die to be born again and again. So the Buddha said, you know, I found a way to end our suffering, but end all future rebirths, so you'll never have to be born again. I teach the path of how not to be born, not how not to die. I thought, man, why didn't I think of that? So here we are, we're working hard, we got the right view, and now we go into the right view of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, and this is what I got from the booklet by Bhikkhu Bodhi. There's two ways of looking at the Eightfold Path. One is a practical way, using our intellect to understand and dissect each path factor. And one is an intuitive way that only comes through the experience of the Eightfold Path, not through the intellectual understanding of the Eightfold Path. But we start with the intellect because that's where we start. That's why we went to school. That's why we have student loan problems, because we have this wonderful intellect that allows us to understand stuff, okay? But we have this wonderful intuition as well, which is atrophied over time because we rely so heavily on our intellect and understanding. So I found with the process of meditation that invigorated my intuition. It allowed me to exercise my intuition in a way that I couldn't do through understanding. So I break it down in this way. The intellect is understanding, and the intuition is knowing. I know this. I know this to be true, you might say. Well, can you explain it? No, I can't explain it. Well, how do you know it's true? Because I know it's true. And that only gets you so far, because after a few sentences like that, people just walk away. But the idea with the intuition is to go into a direct experience of something without having to overlay it with a bunch of concepts and thoughts and ideas. Just simply having that direct experience. So in some forms of Buddhism, Mahayana in particular, what they say is the way to gain both kinds of wisdom through knowing and understanding is like understanding it with the heart and the mind. So the heart is the intuition and the mind is the intellect. And if we can view the Eightfold Path, if we can understand the Eightfold Path, if we can experience the Eightfold Path, we are then able to realize the ultimate goal of Buddhism, which is the end of suffering. And the Eightfold Path is our way, but word of caution. It's not linear. You don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It unfortunately doesn't work that way. Intellectually, it does. But heart-wise, intuition, it doesn't. All those path factors are working together, which allows us to be liberated. But we start with, well, what's path factor number 1? And what's path factor number 2? And how can I practice that? And once I get good at path factor number 2, I'm going to practice path factor number 3. And that's how most people would approach it. That's why we need to have a strong meditation practice connected to our intellectual process in order to balance it out between mind and heart. And that's really the challenge. So we need this practice of meditation. And in the 8 path factors, we'll find 3 of the path factors deal specifically with meditation. And when we get there, I can go into greater detail. So that's what I found to be interesting about the first path factor of right view of karma, right view of the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths, understanding those intellectually and intuitively. Okay, I don't think I have much more to say on the subject, but thanks to all of those who are listening and are still awake. And does anybody have any questions or comments about what's been said so far? And okay. Okay. It says, if you have any comments you'd like to share, raise your hand so we can put you on and then turn on your mic. Raise your hand and turn on your mic. And we're looking at all the people looking, and I don't see any hands yet. I don't see. Oh, okay. Hannah, how are you?
Hi, Reverend Kusala. It's good to hear you. Thank you for the talk. I'm doing okay. I have a question that I think I've been meaning to ask for a long time, and I just remembered it. The part where you were talking about the difference between rebirth and reincarnation, which I think is an important distinction that maybe I didn't completely understand before. So if the goal is to not be born, my question is, I don't understand why I and so many other people, when we think about not being born, when we think about not having rebirth, or maybe I'll just talk about myself. When I think about that, I feel sad, and which is strange because, I have suffered a lot in this lifetime, and if I don't even know that I'm going to get to be me, in the next lifetime, why would I feel sad when I think about not having a rebirth? And the only thing that occurs to me is that I really love a lot of things about being alive. I love a lot of things about just going through the day and being alive. So from the perspective of Buddhism, where does that enter into the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path? Just a love of being alive. Is there, is that okay? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Is it okay to be happy? I don't want to. Yeah, it is okay. And the thing about life is it's not all bad. Generally speaking, we have enough good to prevent us from committing suicide and enough bad to keep us on the path. So we have those two things going on. And then you say to yourself, well, this next person that will be born because I exist today won't even be me. So why should I care? You know, let them work it out in the same way I'm working it out. Well, I think the idea is ultimately what we start to find is we start being taken over by generosity and kindness and wisdom. And we don't want the next person to suffer as much as we did in this lifetime. And so we're going to try to have a good lifetime and then hand it off to whoever shows up. And then they can move it forward. And then that person, if they find Buddhism or find another religion that allows them to see the importance of being a good person, a supportive person, will then help that next person have a better lifetime. And ultimately, either we'll find enlightenment, or at least we'll go to heaven for a few 100,000 lifetimes and enjoy every day, all day, and not have to be satisfied with just enjoying half a day, because we know the other half of the day is going to be terrible, or at least uncomfortable, or at least it could have been better. You know, so this is an interesting dilemma, because if we don't have a soul and we're just a process, then who are we? And I would suggest reading something on the 5 aggregates. And that's what the Buddha said we are: form, sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness. Those 5 things make up us as a human being. And that's the way he described it and presented it. And it's sort of scientific, but not really. I mean, it's 2,500 years ago. So the science was a whole lot different back then, a lot of astrology and stuff. So anyway, yeah, it is a dilemma. But the idea is not to not have a good life, not to be happy. The idea is not to be attached to it, because when it goes away, you suffer even more. And that's the hard part. So can you accept the happiness and joy of life? And then when it's taken away from you, can you simply let it go? And then when you have that miserable day, can you simply keep your hands open? Because that too will be taken away and something else will be taking its place. So this idea of letting go, letting go, letting go, that's the most important part. It's not looking at being happy as a failure. Because I'm a Buddhist, I shouldn't be happy. Why am I happy? I'm failed with the Dharma. I don't understand. The idea is to say, yeah, finally, thanks for showing up for however long you're here. I really appreciate it. And when it's time for you to go, I'll say goodbye. And you'll suffer much less that way.
Thank you. I think I just realized that really the sadness I'm feeling is I'm getting older, and I'm thinking about the time is coming when it will be time for me to let go of my life, right?
Let go of everything forever.
Yeah, and hand off the baton, because there's no self and we're all connected.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's the really interesting thing about aging is when you have more past than future. And now you have to sort of relate to that in a skillful way. And I can remember my grandmother, she was in her 80s when she passed away. And I'm talking to Grandma, and I said, Grandma, how are you today? She said, I'm a little sad. All my friends are dead. I'm going, man, I can't imagine, waking up in the morning and saying all my friends are dead, but that's how she saw it. And as we get older and older, we see more and more death, and more letting go is required, so we don't have to lose our mind and go insane. It's the way it works. People show up, people leave. We show up, we leave. And somewhere in there's a few moments or a few minutes, a few days where we can go, wow, this is so cool. Let's all go to Disneyland and have a great day, and you go, okay, I'm on. And then you look at it and you go, wow, all those people that were at Disneyland today, in 100 years, they'll all be dead. How could they possibly be having a good time? Well, if you live in the moment, there's no future and there's no past. It's just, what am I going to do now? And what am I going to do now? And what am I going to do now? Anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Any other hands coming up? I don't see any. Oh, is that Richard? You want to say
Kusla?
something, Richard?
Reverend Kusla, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. Thank you for your talk. I think the students are very lucky that you'll be teaching them. You're able to capsulize so wonderfully the power and the beauty of Buddhism and how it makes so much sense about life. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Shraddha. And something someone said to me a long time ago comes to mind. They said, "Keep it simple, stupid." And so
You're hardly stupid, my friend.
keep it simple. So, so that's what I tried to do. Thank you. Thank you, Shraddha.
Hi, Reverend Kusala.
Hi.
I want thank you for the wonderful talk today. I enjoy a lot, and I think we all enjoyed. Even though I heard about this subject 1,000 times, but I always, anytime I hear about this, it's all I feel like refreshed. Remind me on daily practice, and very, very wonderful talk. I just want to say something like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Nam.
Well,
Richard, do you have something you want to share? I saw your hand going up.
Yeah, I just want to keep it short. I'm in the car, might be a lot of noise, but I just wanted to hear your speech today, your talk. It's always good to hear this information again, and it makes me think about everything, and that's what we need to do. We need to read it, we need to hear it, and I like the part about your heart and your mind working together to make a complete human. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. John, you have anything you'd like to add? I see you're on. Hey.
Yeah, just wanted to thank you for the talk. It was really helpful to hear, and I appreciated it. Thank you for doing that.
Oh yeah, no, thanks for dropping in and saying hi.
Yeah,
it's good. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've answered all the questions. And now if anybody has any answers, I'm willing to listen. So, okay. So I'm going to turn it back to the Zendo and let that able crew down there take over. Thank you all for dropping in to say hi and listening to what I had to say. Okay, and
page 4 and page 10. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Deluding passions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them all. Dharma gates are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and the sick find health relief. When ye do come, O cup, Chunga Shange Eyano when ye do Konga do O Kap Punyate Yajan Chunga Shange Eyano Thou when ye do Konga do O Kap Punyate Nyajan do Chunga Shange Aikam Om Mani Padme Om Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Thank you all for coming. Next week, we'll continue the study of the Abhidhamma with Swalish. And that's all the announcements that I have. And we'll see you next week. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.